Imagine this. You're lost in the freezing wilderness. The wind is cutting through your jacket like a knife. Your limbs are numb. Your body is shutting down. The odds are against you. No food, no shelter, no rescue. And then you feel it. A presence. It doesn't speak. It doesn't show itself, but somehow you know it's there. Watching, guiding you, keeping you alive. Many who have brushed up against death have experienced this. Soldiers on the battlefield, climbers hanging onto a cliff by their fingertips, shipwrecked sailors drifting in open water, a figure appearing from nowhere, urging them forward, whispering just the right words at just the right time. But here's the thing, they're always alone. No one else is there, and yet they all report the exact same thing. This is the third man factor. One of the most famous and earliest cases of the third man factor happened in 1916, deep in the Antarctic. Sir Ernest Shackleton and his crew had been stranded on the ice for months after their ship, the Endurance, was crushed by the frozen sea. Their only hope was an impossible journey across the violent ocean in a lifeboat, then across the treacherous mountainous terrain of the South Georgia island, on foot. No food, no rest, no margin for error. If they failed, they'd simply vanish into the snow and history would forget them. For 36 hours straight, Shackleton and his two men forced their bodies forward, hallucinating from exhaustion, the wind screaming in their ears. But through it all, Shackleton felt something strange. He later wrote in his journal, "During that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. He could feel it. Someone else was walking beside them. A silent presence, moving in step, watching over them. But when they finally made it to safety, Shackleton turned to his men and asked, 'Who was the 4th?' The other 2 just stared at him. They had all felt it. They had all sensed the extra presence, but none of them could explain it." Just 3 years after Shackleton published his journal, renowned poet T.S. Eliot referenced the incident in his poem The Wasteland. In lines 359 through 365, Eliot wrote, "Who is the third who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together, but when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman, but who is that on the other side of you?" This is where the phenomenon's name of the third man originates. And Shackleton wasn't alone. This silent guide, this invisible presence, has appeared to countless survivors in their most desperate moments. Reynold Messner, one of the world's greatest climbers, felt a shadowy companion climbing beside him as he descended from Nanga Parbat, a climb that should have killed him. It's been found that mountain climbers encounter this phenomenon more than any other group, with solo sailors and shipwrecked survivors noted as the second most common bracket to experience the third man factor. Ron DiFrancesco, a firefighter, was trapped on the 84th floor of the World Trade Center as the second plane crashed into the building. Unable to find an escape, he suddenly heard a voice telling him which stairwell to take. In his words, "Someone told me to get up." Ron clarifies that it was not the voice of anyone else in the stairwell. The voice was male and encouraging, telling him that he could do it. Ron states, "I was led to the stairs. I don't think something grabbed my hand, but I was definitely led." Because of this unexplained voice, Ron was one of 4 people to escape the building from above the 81st floor. Another account of this mysterious, helpful voice comes from an anonymous woman who submitted her experience to BuzzFeed. "I was alone downstairs watching TV, and my son was asleep upstairs in his crib. I heard a male voice very close by say 2 words, 'Go, now.' Startled, I jumped up and took the stairs 2 at a time to my son's room, where I found he'd somehow moved his entire crib. He moved it enough that he could reach his silver metal airplane mobile and put the weighted ball into his mouth, and he was silently choking on it. I flipped him over on my arm and did the maneuver to expel it, and we both sat on the floor crying in relief. Now, no sound came from the baby monitor that we had. If not for that clear warning, he wouldn't be 37 years old now." While climbing the Canadian Rockies in Alberta, ice climbers James Savegny and Richard Whitmere became entangled in an avalanche that carried them nearly 2,000 feet. Coming back to consciousness, James Savigny realized his partner Richard Whitmere had been killed. Savigny himself had his back broken in 2 places, torn ligaments in his knees, a broken arm, cracked ribs, severed nerves, broken teeth, and internal bleeding. As he accepted his fate and began to give up, he suddenly felt a presence beside him. Nobody was visibly there, but he could feel that someone was. Savigny says that the presence communicated mentally to him, "You can't give up, you have to try." The presence told him to follow the blood dripping from his nose as if it were an arrow pointing towards base camp. The entire way he struggled back, falling into the snow and crawling, but the presence remained at his right shoulder the entire time, urging him on. Eventually, James made it back to the camp where he received aid from the people there. Once the presence left him, James recalls feeling an extreme loneliness. The survivors all say the same thing. It wasn't just in their heads. Something is truly there with them, helping to guide and push them to survive. It felt real, more real than the ground beneath their feet. But here's the truly bizarre part. The third man is never hostile, never malevolent, never cruel. It's always calm, reassuring. It never panics, even when the person it's guiding is on the brink of death. But it also never shows its face. Science, of course, has its explanations. Extreme stress, exhaustion, and isolation can trigger hallucinations. Your brain, desperate to keep you from giving up, may create an extra presence to help guide you through. There's even a term for it, sensorometer deprivation. When your mind lacks external input, it fills in the blanks. But here's what science doesn't explain. The third man doesn't just appear, it guides people to safety with knowledge they shouldn't have. Some survivors have felt a hand physically pull them up or touch them when no one was there. And sometimes they leave behind evidence. Footprints that shouldn't exist, areas clear of debris that show where a person should have been, a presence that multiple people feel at the same time. Like this encounter shared by another anonymous user to BuzzFeed. I was driving on a somewhat rural road on a very windy winter's day. The snow was being whipped across the road and a sudden gust of wind hit the back end of my car. This caused me to fishtail and I lost control. I shot across oncoming traffic, off an embankment, and rolled the car into a field. As I was airborne, I felt someone sitting next to me in the passenger seat. After the car flipped 360 degrees and slammed back down on the tires, I heard a voice in my head tell me I was unharmed and felt a gentle caress across my forehead. Once I had determined my neck wasn't broken and I could move, I saw that I was covered in windshield glass. It was everywhere except for the passenger seat. There was only glass bits around the edges of the seat, like someone had been sitting there. I didn't have a scratch or bruise on me. The police officers and the tow truck driver couldn't believe I was uninjured, given the state of my car. Since then, I have tried extra hard to be a better human to repay whoever or whatever saved me that day. So, what if this isn't just the brain tricking itself? What if the third man factor is something else entirely? Many believe the third man is a guardian spirit, revealing itself only in our most vulnerable moments. This would line up with the traditional definition of a guardian angel, since the third man is never anything but kind and encouraging. Or is it just a psychological defense mechanism, a last-ditch survival instinct from the human brain? Like in that movie Limitless, where Bradley Cooper takes a drug to access all of his brain. Suddenly, he's able to access knowledge buried so deep inside himself that he didn't even know he knew it until his brain pulled it out of him.
A fight? Don't know how to fight. Or do I?
Could the third man simply be the brain pulling out every stop? Things we've watched, read, or heard in passing in an attempt to save us? Or could it be something more supernatural, like a glitch in reality, a tear in the veil between life and death? But what if the real question isn't about what they are? Maybe the real question is, why do they only appear when we're about to die? If you've ever felt an invisible presence guiding you in a moment of crisis, let me know in the comments below. There have been many times in my solo travels and hikes where I've been lost or discombobulated and never felt such a presence. Granted, I've never been about to die, but there was one time when I was lost in the Californian desert, scrambling over seemingly endless boulder-covered mountains. I was aware of this phenomenon, and to tell you the truth, I was dreading a voice suddenly telling me it was okay and to keep going. Maybe, in a way, my knowledge of this mystery and telling myself to keep going to keep the creepy voice away was also some form of the third man? Probably not. If you're interested in reading more, check out John Geiger's book, The Third Man Factor: Surviving the Impossible. But what do you think? Is the third man factor just a trick of the mind or something far more terrifying? Thanks for watching.